The word phenom gets thrown around a lot in the world of sports anytime a young player on the rise starts to play at a high level, but when we get down to it, there are very few talents that truly encapsulate the aura of a true phenom. Zion Williamson is a player who, without a shred of a doubt, was one of the last true phenoms we've seen, and there was a time when he looked like an all-time great in the making. But as things stand after years have passed, we're seeing a different outcome play out, and we may need to officially lower our expectations of him from here on out because his ceiling does not seem to be as high as many originally thought. In this video, we're going to be going through what got Zion Williamson to this point, what made him such an incredible phenomenon to begin with, where things went wrong, and what to realistically expect from him moving forward. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I'd also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. I still remember the days when Zion Williamson was first starting to get some national attention, and I'm sure many of you do as well. His sophomore year high school mixtape legitimately looks like a grown man playing on lowered rims against middle school children, and his freakish athleticism combined with his overwhelming size and strength was like nothing we've seen since LeBron James was a prospect. The footage of his high school days were so hard to truly fathom that there were plenty of people at the time thinking it was too good to be true, and writing him off as a serious player because the competition he was playing against couldn't have possibly been that good if he was dominating at the rate that he was. And he was making the game look too easy, so something had to be up in the eyes of many. He, of course, also started to gain a cult-like following at the time for the very same reason though, because every single game he stepped on the court, he was putting on a show of athletic prowess that couldn't be replicated anywhere else. Things started to get real when he finished his high school career ranked as the number 2 prospect in the class of 2018 in ESPN's database, and he, along with the number 1 and number 3 prospects, RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish, all committed to play at Duke in college, putting them under the microscope, playing on the biggest stage in the biggest program in the country. The whole basketball world was waiting to see what he could do against elevated competition after years of mythical footage of him dominating what was seemingly weaker competition, and there was no better test than Duke's opening game of the season, which came against Kentucky, featuring current NBA pros such as Tyler Hero, Emmanuel Quickley, PJ Washington, and Keldon Johnson. Kentucky came in as the higher-ranked team for that game, but by the end, the country was put on notice that this Duke squad was the real deal, as they blew Kentucky out of the water, winning by 32 points, in which Zion Williamson scored 28 points, shooting 11 of 13 from the field. That was the moment when things really started to feel special, because it became clear that Zion was the real deal, and that we as fans were in for a treat. From there, Zion's dominance continued as he averaged 22.6 points per game, shooting a ridiculous 68% from the field as a freshman, and his highlight reel from his year at Duke honestly doesn't look much different than his high school tape did, further putting to rest the notion that he was only benefiting from bad competition. He and RJ Barrett led Duke all the way to the Elite Eight that year, before losing to Michigan State by 1 point, and all in all, Zion solidified himself as a can't-miss number 1 prospect that NBA teams were salivating over. Except, there were a few warning signs that, in hindsight, foreshadowed his NBA future. In the highly anticipated Duke vs. UNC game that year, for example, Zion got injured 30 seconds into it because he burst through his shoe somehow and suffered a knee injury as a result of it. The absurd power that allowed him to dominate any matchup ultimately came back to bite him because it predicted the unfortunate truth about how unstable the force and power that he plays with at his size was. It's no secret that Zion is a big dude, arguably too big, but it's really a double-edged sword because the fact that he's able to so nimbly maneuver past defenders with a tight handle while being able to overpower them with the ease that he does is exactly what makes him such an unstoppable force. The problem, of course, is that the human body simply cannot handle that level of force on a consistent basis for someone who, when he was drafted, was already the heaviest player in the entire NBA. That shoe breaking signified everything that would get in his way as a pro and ultimately leads us to where we are now. Zion then went on to be the #1 overall pick in the 2019 NBA draft by the New Orleans Pelicans, of course, but right away the injury bug began to strike even more. In Summer League, he injured his knee again, and that forced him to miss the first 44 games of his rookie year. When he made his return and debut, he picked up right back up where he left off and played like a star in the making, though. He would even be named to an All-Star in his second season in the league, averaging 27 points per game that year, dominating the paint at a rate we literally had not seen since prime Shaquille O'Neal, as 19.5 of those points per game that Zion was scoring came in the paint, which is a number that literally had not been beaten since Shaq during his 2000 MVP season. Things like that were why there was still so much faith in his ability to reach true superstardom heights, because at full strength there very literally wasn't a single player with a better combination of strength, speed, and touch around the basket, and the numbers spoke for themselves. But as we previewed earlier, this level of power just is not sustainable, because during the next offseason, he suffered a Jones fracture in his foot, forcing him to get surgery, and as a result, he missed the entirety of the 2022 NBA season, killing all of the momentum that he had just built up. His road to recovery was long and arduous, but he did manage to get back to his prior form again the next year, once again being named an All-Star behind averages of 26 points per game, but he also only managed to play in 29 games before once again injuring himself. This time it was his hamstrings, which caused him to miss the rest of that year, and then that brings us to the current version of Zion that we are seeing play now. Last season, Zion actually did manage to play 70 games, which is the most he's played in a single season yet, but he changed a few things in order to make that happen, and his production also saw a noticeable dip to about 23 points per game, which of course is still good, but it's not the dominant level of good we were used to seeing from him before. This season, Zion has also gotten off to a pretty slow start as well, scoring fewer than 20 points in 3 of the first 4 games, and honestly, he looks like a shell of his former self, but it's not by accident. After all of the injuries piling up on him, he is, for good reason, trying to play more grounded, which is why the jaw-dropping feats of athleticism and explosiveness that got him so popular have not been a regular part of his game in a while. His legs simply can't withstand the pressure put on them from a guy who is also one of the heaviest players in the league. He still catches the occasional backdoor lob, and most of his work is still done around the basket, bullying his defenders, but it's a lot more predictable this way, and the fact that his jumper has never really developed into a weapon has held him back from being able to take that next step towards being elite without having to rely on his athleticism all the time. He's taken 66 total shots so far this season, and 59 of them have been within 10 feet of the basket. He hasn't hit a single mid-range jumper yet, and he's made just 1 three-pointer, so defenses know what he wants to do when he gets the ball, and while he's very good at getting to his spots regardless, it does limit just how effective he can be, and it's never been more clear than it was over the last 2 games, where he and his Pelicans squad have now lost back-to-back games against the Warriors, who in both games were missing Steph Curry, which is unacceptable and speaks to Zion no longer being able to be that guy that can lead a winner. Being realistic about what Zion will be moving forward, he's still one of the best interior scorers in the NBA. He's become a pretty impressive secondary ball handler who can facilitate by way of dishing out about 5 assists per game, and as a help side defender, he rotates well to cut off a lot of opposing shots at the rim and get some highly impressive blocks. The days of him soaring through the air game after game are probably over though, so the dream of him becoming a top 10 player in the league probably ends with it, because that's what made him a once-in-a-lifetime level athletic prospect. He's still going to have his flashes of brilliance, he's still going to be a borderline all-star for years to come, and he's still one of the better players at his position at full strength. But 5 years ago, Zion entered the NBA with hopes and expectations of taking the league by storm, potentially being the next face of the NBA, and those are the dreams that need to be laid to rest for good. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about Zion's career moving forward. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.